This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FY Investment Group and your host of Washington Calling, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, we're fortunate to have a distinguished guest who's a dear friend, and his name is Ambassador Arun Singh. He has extensive experience across the globe, including India's ambassador to the United States, Israel, and France. Throughout his distinguished career in the Indian Foreign Service, Ambassador Singh has served during pivotal periods in key global capitals. He was instrumental in shaping India's policies, which includes the US-India relationship. So thank you, Ambassador Singh, for coming to our show, and welcome to our show. It's nice to see you.
Thank you, Frank. Good to be with you and delighted to see you again.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Ambassador Singh, you have been deeply engaged in driving the Indo-US ties. First, the Deputy Chief of Mission, which is when I met you, then as the Ambassador to the United States. How do you see the recently concluded state visit to the White House of Prime Minister Modi to the United States? And I had a privilege of attending the state dinner with the Modi and the President Biden, who's a dear friend. And he also addressed the joint session of Congress. And he was the first, maybe the second foreign leader after Benjamin Netanyahu, I think that was Israel, to address the US Congress twice, which is a privilege. And I was invited, and I was there for a few minutes, and then I have to go back to get my tuxedo on so that I can go to the White House. But my question to you is, do you think the Prime Minister Modi's visit was rich in style and in substance? Do you think US-India relationship reached to the next level of height, including the trade, commerce, investment, and defense? And do you believe, and I want you to shed bright light, that Ambassador Singh, what are the areas the two sides reach agreement that includes the trade, defense, technology, and climate change?
Thank you. And I think you've raised very important issues. From my perspective, the visit was clearly a milestone. It's taking the relationship to another level. First, in terms of the optics and also in terms of substance. Now, if you look at the optics, as you know, he was invited for an official state visit. Now, the US very rarely gives that level of protocol to foreign leaders, mainly once or twice a year. Right. And in fact, in the Biden administration, the entire 2.5 years of the Biden administration, before Prime Minister Modi, only 2 foreign leaders had been received at this level of protocol. Right. There was President Macron of France in November, December last year, and the President of South Korea in April this year. Yeah. So only the third leader. So that was one indication. And also Prime Minister Modi was historically the third Indian leader ever to be received this level of protocol. There was Dr. Radhakrishnan in 1963, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in 2009, and Prime Minister Modi. And as you mentioned, he was also invited to address a joint session of the US Congress for the second time. He has addressed the joint session earlier in 2016 when I was there as ambassador, and I was present on the occasion in the Congress. And very few world leaders have had this opportunity. There was Winston Churchill of the UK, Nelson Mandela of South Africa, Yitzhak Rabin of Israel, and Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, and now Prime Minister Modi. So I think this reflects the bipartisan support among Democrats and Republicans for the US-India relationship that they wanted to invite the Prime Minister again. So this is in terms of the optics. I think the third element that came out in terms of the visual impact was the huge involvement of the Indian origin diaspora. You know, at the welcome that was done in the South Lawn of the White House, so more than 8,000 people present. It is unusual. You don't see that other
right.
And then they were present at different occasions. There was also an event done at the Wilson Center. There was before that an event at Kennedy Center. So a huge involvement in the Indian origin diaspora, including at this visit. And of course, you will recall that during Prime Minister's earlier visits to New York in 2014, San Jose in 2015, Houston in 2019, there were 20 to 50,000 Indian origin people who had gathered to hear an address from the Indian Prime Minister. Now, in terms of substance, if you see the joint statement that was issued after the visit, it clearly indicates how both countries, both leaders, are ready to take the relationship with one another. In a very unique way, the joint statement says that technology will be the defining element in the partnership.
Right.
Now, that's rare. If you are making technology and emerging technology is a defining element of the partnership, it means that you have high level of trust and confidence in the relationship and you want to build it further. And going beyond that, when they listed out the kind of technologies they want to partner in, there was a reference to critical and emerging technologies.
Right.
Artificial intelligence, quantum, cyber, 6G, semiconductors, commercialization of space, defense, biotech. Now, these technologies are going to completely transform the way we live, the way we work. It will be useful to India as we try to strengthen our economy. It will also be useful to the US as the US is dealing with the economic, technological, and military challenge from China, in which India will be a very important partner for the US. So in these emerging technologies, they signal that we want to build a new partnership. Going beyond that, they looked at a partnership in defense. Now, the US government has authorized the transfer of technology and production in India of the GE 414 engine. And from what US officials indicate, this level of technology transfer, the US has so far not allowed to any other country.
Right.
So again, if they are doing that now, it's a reflection of a great deal of trust. Another area that caught my attention was the cooperation in space.
Right. I talked to the NASA administrator. He was there at the reception, South Lawn, with us.
No, that's right. And ISRO and NASA already cooperating.
Right.
For example, when India had launched its mission to the moon, Chandrayaan, in 2008, there was some partnership also from NASA. But in this statement, there is an indication that US will now partner with India in India's human space flight mission. And the two countries will look at mounting a joint mission to the International Space Station in 2024. And earlier in January this year, they had indicated that NASA, in its commercial lunar mission, will convene a meeting of Indian and US entities involved in the private sector in space to see how they could partner together. So in India today, now we have a new space policy based on which opportunity has been created for the private sector also to play a role in space technologies, while earlier it was limited to the government. And Indian private sector has shown a lot of strength now in launches, in satellites, in communication capabilities. So there is a new potential for India and US companies to participate. So if you look at it in these areas, critical and emerging technologies, defense technologies, space technologies, these are areas that they have now identified for a new partnership.
I agree with you.
As I mentioned, for India, of course, this is useful. But for the US, a partnership of India's human tech capital is important for its global leadership.
Also will create a job for us as well. And we can so that will be, I want to ask you, you were ambassador in Washington 2015, 2016, I believe. And
that's right.
Did you foresee the steady upward trajectory in the bilateral ties then? And do you think the landscape has changed since you were the ambassador of the United States?
So the upward trajectory was clearly visible, but the landscape has changed dramatically between then and now. Now, let's explain that to you. I think the process of changing or bringing about an upward trajectory was started by President Bush when he did the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement in 2008. Because before that, there were a lot of technology restrictions on India. And the Bush administration decided that they wanted to improve the relationship with India. And they assessed that if they wanted to do a wider relationship with India, the first thing they needed to do was remove restrictions related to civil nuclear cooperation. Because without that, they couldn't allow other areas of cooperation. So once they did the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement, higher level technology cooperation was possible in other areas, in defense technologies, dual use technologies. For example, till 2008, India hardly bought any defense supplies from the US.
Right.
And now India has contracted to buy more than $20 billion of defense supplies.
Do you think we're going to shift the weapon purchase of weapon from the Russia to the United States?
I think that is not really the purpose. You know, India has 4 major defense partners today.
Right.
Russia, Israel, France, and the US. And from India's perspective, India wants to maintain the autonomy of its decision making. And therefore, India must consolidate all these partnerships so that on each issue, it is able to take decisions based on its own interests. But that having been said, clearly India is doing more and more with the US over time. If you look at the kind of military exercises we do, the US does more military exercises with India than with any other country outside NATO.
Right.
And India does more military exercises with the US than with any other country. And these are increasing in frequency, increasing in complexity. And so again, going back to the question you raised, whether things have changed since then. No, if you recall, in 2012-13, India and US had done the Defense Trade and Technology Initiative, but that was not very successful. But in 2014, US declared India a major defense partner, and that was President Obama. Then 2018, President Trump, a Republican, placed India on strategic trade authorization level 1 for highest level technology releases on the same level as NATO partners of the US. So it is all this that led to the discussion now on the critical and emerging technologies and the launch that the national security advisors of the two countries did in January this year of a new initiative on critical and emerging technologies, a signal to the administration in both countries, a signal to industry, signal to academia, that from the national security perspective, we believe that India and US should partner in these technologies. I think that was an important message. All this has led to a changing of the landscape, which led to this very highly successful visit of the Indian Prime Minister.
Very well said, Mr. Ambassador. As you know, India is not a treaty ally of the United States. We know that. And like Japan is and the United Kingdom is, but yet the relationship is called one of the most defining partnership of the 21st century, President Biden said when he welcomed the Prime Minister Modi. So my question to you is, what are the fundamental areas of convergence and shared interests and shared values that will be, in your view, the key drivers of global dynamics? And also, do you believe the India partnership is founded on shared interest and shared values and commitment to democracy?
Absolutely. I think the partnership is based on shared interests and shared values, because shared interests are important to see the convergence, and shared values add another dimension to the relationship. And if I were to analyze what are the factors that have brought about this convergence, from my perspective, there are two broad factors. The first, the advantage to both from the bilateral partnership. You know, India is today the 5th largest economy globally. By 2030, India will be the 3rd largest economy globally. So there is a lot of opportunity for US companies in India, and they have invested more than $54 billion in the Indian economy. Now, very interestingly, something that not many people realize, Indian companies have done major investments in the US.
Yes, they have.
By now, Indian companies have invested more than $40 billion in the US economy and have a presence across all 50 states. Secondly, when I was in Washington, I used to visit different parts of the US, including Silicon Valley. And US companies used to tell me that for their global leadership in innovation, their partnership with India's technical human capital was critical. Many of them were employing 3,000, 5,000, 8,000 people in India, doing cutting-edge design and technology work for them. The IP was, of course, with the US company, but the Indian human capital was involved. And then if you go to Silicon Valley, you can see that Indian origin tech workers, Indian origin entrepreneurs, Indian origin CEOs are an integral part of US global leadership in innovation. So if US is to meet the economic, technological, and military challenge from China, US also needs the partnership with India, a country with 1.4 billion people. Now, beyond the bilateral, there is a convergence for both countries in terms of the challenge they see from China. As China has grown, it has become more unilateral and assertive in its positions. You see what's happening in East China Sea, South China Sea, around Taiwan, along the line of actual control between India and China. So given that, there is a convergence of interest for India and the US to work together, as I said, to shape the environment around the rise of China. And I used to hear from US leaders that even if India is not overtly anti-China, they believe that the rise of India in itself will be a deterrent against China's unilateral and assertive behavior. So I think that's the framework in which both countries are consolidating the relationship.
Do you think the relationship is transactional?
Well, all relationships are transactional. Name me one which is not. Ultimately, every country has to look
Yes,
at
yes,
maximizing its
it is,
interests.
it is.
Without that, it can't have a solid basis. And
That's
again,
good.
Frank, if you look at closest partners for the US, Israel today, a very close partner, does not entirely follow the US approach on the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
No.
Turkey, a member of NATO, has a different posture related to the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
They sure
So,
do.
even in allies, there's not always 100% convergence.
Yeah, that's a very well said, Mr. Ambassador. You have 70 keyword capitals, including being Indian ambassador to France and Israel. Do you see a major change in how these countries view India today? Do you think that India is now rising and India's role is on the world stage? Do you believe that?
No, absolutely. In fact, as we discussed, the Indian Prime Minister had a very, very successful visit to the US. And as you know, the Indian Prime Minister has been invited by the President of France to be the guest of honor on July 14 this year,
I did not know
on
that.
Bastille Day. And the Indian Prime Minister will be there. And in the entire duration of President Macron's term, since 2017, the Indian Prime Minister will be only the second leader to be accorded this honor. The first was President Trump, who had been invited by President Macron. And there will be a contingent of tri-services contingent of the Indian Armed Forces, who will be marching along with French troops on the occasion. So it's a reflection of how France looks at the India relationship. So I think globally, there is a recognition that India's stature on the world stage has risen. India has shown its capacities. You're seeing the manner in which India has handled the G20 process,
Right.
The kind of meetings, the manner in which they have conducted. India has also reached out to countries of the global south to get their inputs and bring it for discussion in the G20. So I think there is a recognition that even though formally India is not a member of the UN Security Council, India is really a country that has a major role to play at the world stage. For the G7 meetings where India is not a member, India has now been regularly invited for many years.
That is
and this year, again, as a signal honor, President Biden, as the host, has invited the Indian Prime Minister to be present in California for the EPIC summit that is going to be held in November. Again, a reflection not just of the US-India relationship, but US-India's stature on the global stage.
I want to shift my gears and talk to you about India diaspora in the United States. As you know, they have become a significant soft power in furthering India's rise and raising its global stock. What are the key characteristics of Indians that has made them world's most recognized diaspora? Do you believe that the Indian diaspora can help India achieve its fullest potential? Do you think they have a character, capacity, and also the commitment to help India? And can they be vital resource in areas such as healthcare, I will say, skills development, entrepreneurship, innovation, philanthropy, education, and creating jobs, and so on and so forth? Do you think they're the positive to help India as a pivotal area? They can bring what I consider broad-based economic benefits to India?
No, absolutely. So, as you know, the Indian origin diaspora has now been playing a very important role in the US.
Well, I am
one
one
out
of
of
them.
6. You are one of them. You're very
Yes,
successful.
I am.
You made a contribution in the US. You also been involved with politics in the US. So, your role is itself a reflection. But more than that, as you know, 1 out of 6 patients in the US is seen by an Indian
That
origin
is true.
doctor. 40% of all hotel rooms in the US are owned and managed by Indian origin people.
That is true.
Indians have now become active in politics. We have 5 members in US Congress.
Yeah.
The vice president is a person of Indian origin. Very many key people in the administration are persons of Indian origin. We know about the role in business. Major US companies, Microsoft, Google, Adobe, IBM, Starbucks, Micron,
Federal Express, Honeywell.
Federal Express. Yeah, persons of Indian origin.
Right.
So they are making a very major contribution, and the US society recognizes that. Now, given their capacities there and their deeper understanding and knowledge of India, they will certainly be in a position to also contribute to India, processes in India, if they are interested and if their companies are interested in building that partnership. And many are. As you can see, Microsoft is very active in India. Google has just announced another $10 billion worth of investment that they're going to do in the fintech sector. So I think there is an ability now to use this network to build further the trade, technology, and investment partnership between India and US. And through that, it will contribute to different sectors. So this is really a resource that I think both countries can tap into for mutual benefit as we expand the bilateral relationship.
Very well said, Mr. Ambassador. And that's our show. Until the next time, this is Frank Islam wishing you a great week. And thank you, Mr. Ambassador. It was nice to see you. Thank you for watching. This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week.